the SEAL teams, we have a pretty good track record with defeating the enemy on the battlefield. And no, we're not perfect, and we have our share of mistakes, but our track record is quite good when it comes to crushing the enemy. And there are several contributing factors for this. One is we have toys. We have technology, the aircraft, the thermal, the night vision, the weapons, that all helps. We're very creative and innovative in the development of our tactics, meticulous in our planning. But there's one concept, this one simple concept that I feel above all is responsible for our success. And that's this, being brilliant on the basics. It's our ability to identify, select, prioritize, and master the most fundamental aspects of our craft by drilling these basic things over and over and over again until we can perform that at a near reflexive level. So my challenge to you is for you, no matter what kind of dynamic, radical change, whether it's the market, industry, whether it's your leadership team, whatever that is, what are some very basic things that you can devote resources and prioritize that you're going to get after? No matter what happens, we need to be good. I need to be good at these few things. Because when you're on the X, when you're in that high stakes moment, you want that stuff to be at your fingertips. Those studies, the skills, the knowledge, whatever that is, you want to just be able to draw on that. And that will take a huge mental load off of you when you're in that stressful situation, or when you need to be at your best. Now, unfortunately, that's not the whole answer. Because we need to be able to have those skills and that knowledge. We need to have it at our fingertips, but we need to do it in the clutch. And for that, we need to develop this, the mental game. If you've ever seen Discovery Channel on BUD/S, the SEAL selection process, probably one of the most famous weeks is something called Hell Week. Anybody ever heard of that? Right? And for the uninitiated, it's a 5-day fun fest consisting of constant physical activity, almost zero sleep, and frequent immersion into very cold water. And it tests two things. One, your level of commitment. Are you willing to pay the price to be part of our community? Two, your ability to collaborate. Are you willing to put the needs of the mission, of your team, above your own needs and your own personal suffering that you have going on right then? And if the answer is yes, you move on to the next phase, which is dive phase. In dive phase, the next biggest barrier to graduation, to entry, is a test called pull comp, pull competency. Pull comp is what this gentleman is going through right now, is the culmination of a 5-day pull week where you learn basic scuba diving procedures in a 9-foot swimming pool. You practice early in the week, you take your stuff on, you take it off in very exacting and precise sequences. Pull comp, the test itself, has you like this poor fella, crawling along on the bottom of the pool. Instructor comes down, rips your mask off, rips your fins off, and he starts to give you increasingly more challenges to your air source. He'll route your hoses around your tanks, tie them in knots. You figure it out. You get a couple puffs, and he does it again. Now they're not. After about 2-3 times of this, you start to become really desperate for some air. And then you start doing what we affectionately know as the funky chicken. You're doing one of these things. If all you can think about is how badly you need air, one of two things is going to happen. One, you're going to panic, you're going to bolt to the surface, or two, you're going to perform something incorrectly out of sequence. Either way, you fail. Thanks for coming out. See you later. Now, about 15 years ago, they were having such a hard time getting guys through this portion of the training. They're only getting 1/3 of the candidates through this training. Now, these are guys that are committed. They would run through a wall for one another. Yet when they get here on that X, in that acute, stressful situation, they panic. They can't process. It's a fight, flight, or freeze, and they lock up, and they do something wrong, or they panic. And so like, well, what are we going to do? We need guys on the battlefield, but we're sure not going to lower training standards. Like, all right, well, what's the answer? Well, they looked at the various communities in professional sports where you have people that have to perform day in, day out in the most high-stakes situations for them. And they came away with performance psychology that we used. They came away with a few techniques that the instructors there started using with the candidates. The same techniques that we used when we created this program for the Navy called Warrior Toughness. To be able to have the right response, where you respond with the right action. You don't react blindly in panic. So we came away with these techniques. The first one, energy management, also known as arousal control. But when you're talking to a bunch of 18-year-old kids at boot camp, you should probably just call it energy management. Found that out the hard way, right? When we get scared, when we get stressed, there's this little reptilian part of our brain known as the amygdala. And it takes 1 of 30 billion nerves to turn that on. And when it fires up, and if it fires up too high, and you're in what we call the black, you lose your ability to think critically. You lose your ability to learn new information. You lose your fine motor skills. And you make the wrong decision. You panic. What we want to do is dial that stress response down. So you have the kind of stress that helps us, that sharpens our focus, that elevates our level of performance. So we got after this a couple ways. First, brilliant on the basics. Already heard of it, right? Knowing our material over and over again so they can execute it at a near reflexive level. The second piece is we walk them through box breathing. When I do workshops, we'll go through these different breathing techniques. Before we would get into that situation, we lower the energy. Law enforcement uses this. When they're getting ready to serve a warrant, they'll do box breathing to lower that energy before they even go into the room. And so when we train recruits, you think of this young recruit, first time away from home, we get them in to fight a fire, and they start locking up because they're overwhelmed. At this point, training value is lost. So we'll stop them, we'll drag them out, we'll do some box breathing, we'll lower that energy, we'll revisit the sequences, the procedures they need to do to be successful, and we'll push them back. 9 times out of 10, they're successful. The next piece is mental rehearsal. If you've ever seen the Olympic athletes kind of doing that dance with their eyes closed, that's what they're doing, also known as visualization. They're gaining repetitions by being in that moment in their minds. And in order for this to be effective, they need to do 2 things. One, it has to be very vivid. So in the pool, this looks like, all right, what does that water feel like? The cold water, what does that feel like? What does the chlorine smell like? What noises do I hear? You put yourself in that moment as realistically as possible, and it's very effective. And then we'll pair this with self-talk. And as humans, we talk to ourselves more than we do anybody else. Hopefully just the one person. But when we do, it's got to be specific, it's got to be realistic, and it's got to be helpful. Now, you can take me to the track and time me running a mile. And little engine that could it all day long, I can say I can run a 5:30. Well, this husky kid is not running a 5-minute, 30-second pace around the track, not anymore. But what I can do is give myself some useful, realistic, helpful information. I can say, all right, I'm physically fit. Let me focus on my breathing. Let me focus on my stride, whatever you running nerds out there like to talk about when you're doing running stuff. You give yourself cues, and you give yourself the talk that provides you focus on the things that you need to do to excel in that situation. Back there on that rooftop, I said to myself, I've never been in this situation before. I've never been shot at. But what I do know is I've been well-trained, and so is he. We're going to get these Army guys. We're going to figure this out. We're going to get out of here. So I'm back there waiting for the armored vehicles to pick us up at the extraction point. It became very clear to me that there is no substitute for the right kind of preparation and training. When I'm in that gunfight on that roof, we use some very specific cues. For us, very basic, 3 things. Shoot, move, communicate. Return fire, engage the threats. We're going to have to maneuver. We're going to have to maneuver, kill the enemy, or withdraw. Now I need to communicate that to the other team members. I say that mantra to myself to keep me focused. I'm not thinking about consequence. I'm not thinking about what happened yesterday. I'm there in a moment, I'm present, and I'm effective.